Okay, hello and welcome to the second video of section 1 of our volume 1 basic Unreal Engine C++ programming. Now before we start our project, in the previous video you installed Unreal Engine, and now before we actually go ahead and start our first project, we need to take care of the second prerequisite for the rest of this video and the rest of these series, and that is installing Visual Studio. Unreal Engine 4 requires Visual Studio 2013 or above, and ideally Visual Studio 2015 or above, for you to be able to perform C++ programming within Unreal Engine. My version of Visual Studio that you see here is 2015 Enterprise. You can still work with 2015 Community. So if you don't have the Visual Studio, go ahead and go on the Microsoft website, and either from DreamSparks or directly from a Microsoft website, download any version of Visual Studio that is more than Community 2015. Once you install your Visual Studio, you need to make sure that you install the Visual C++ components for it. So if you install your Visual Studio and you click on File, New, and Project, you will need to go under the templates and click on Visual Studio, Visual C++ and expand it, and see if you have these Visual C++ components installed. If not, there will be links associated with the templates, and simply click on the links and install the required components for your Visual Studio. At this point, I don't want you to create a new project. Just simply close this dialog and make sure that you do have Visual Studio installed 2015 or above, and also Visual C++ compilers installed within your Visual Studio. Once you have these, then you will be able to start programming with Unreal Engine. So back on the Epic Launcher, what I would like you to do, now that we confirmed that you have Visual Studio 2015, go ahead and click on Launch for Unreal Engine 4.15 to start the program. So after a little bit, the Unreal Engine starts up, and the Unreal Project browser will open up. And that's, you can see I have a bunch of projects that are already created. So you could either open an already created project, or you can create a new project. So what we will do is we'll click on the New Project tab, and then you will be able to choose between several templates that are already designed and established within the Unreal Editor. And there are two different types of projects that you can create. The visual scripting Unreal Engine projects, which are called blueprint projects, are one way of creating your games, and C++ projects are the other way. So this video lecture concerns programming Unreal Engine games and projects with C++, and obviously we will click on the C++ templates. There are several types of templates that are available to you to create. If you wanted to create a game from scratch, completely from nothing, you would choose the basic code. And obviously, if your game falls under a certain genre or a certain type of game that the template's already created for it, you could select these templates that would pre-populate your game with basic components. And the templates that you have as of Unreal Engine 4.15 for the C++ projects are first-person templates. Basically, you will have a camera and the first-person view of the player. You would have flying templates, puzzle templates, rolling games, side-scrollers, two-dimensional side-scroller, third-person template, top-down template, twin stick shooter template, vehicle template, and advanced vehicle template. So for this particular project that I would like to show you how to set up and basically do simple basic logging within your first project, we will choose the third-person template. As you see with the third-person template, you will basically have a third-person mannequin, that would be your player, and some basic geometry and meshes are already populated within the level. So you would basically get a level, your player, its animation, as well as the basic controls for this player are going to be built in within this template. You can also select the settings of your game. The first option here is choosing between desktop, console, or mobile and tablet games. Desktop console games basically utilize your input-output based off of a desktop or game console, and mobile and tablet-based game changes the input for your game as well as the structure of how the output is going to be rendered on a tablet. And obviously the quality of the materials and the images are going to be a little different between these two templates. So we're going to choose desktop. Then you can also choose the quality that you want. You can either choose the maximum quality with all the shading and particle systems and everything at full scale, or you could choose scalable 2D or 3D quality. So we'll choose maximum quality. And you can choose either to make your game completely from no pre-populated assets or use starter content. So if you choose the starter contents, you would, off the box, you would get basic textures, basic materials, and stuff like that within your game. And if you choose no starter content, you would have none of those, and you would have to create all the materials, assets, meshes, and things from scratch. So you will choose the starter content. Obviously, you can choose the location of your project. In my case, the location of the project is basically under My Documents and Unreal Projects, and then you can give a name to your project. So let's call this Unreal Scripting Basic, and then you click on Create Project, and it will take a little bit for the Unreal Engine to set up your project, to create the project. And then since this is a C++ project, once the project is created, two things will happen. You will see the project open in the Unreal Editor, and then you will also see the project open up in the Visual Studio. Basically, Visual Studio 2015 is what I'm using. Okay, the project has started, and the first window that you see pop open is your Unreal Editor. In the Unreal Editor, you would see several different sections, and I'm not going to go into the detail of explaining these sections for you. You can watch some basic introductions to the Unreal Editor from the Unreal Engine's YouTube channel. But basically, if you look at the editor, you would have the modes component of the editor, where you can have access to your basic geometry to place items, to paint vertices or textures on items within the game, to use the landscape editor to create outdoors environments, or to use the foliage editor to paint foliages and certain types of meshes on your landscape, and or the edit mode for your geometry, where you can manipulate your BSP brushes or binary space partition brushes. At the bottom here, let's go back to the place mode. At the bottom here, you will notice that you will have the content browser. The content browser is where you can basically take a look at where different things on your game are. So for example, in this code template that we created, we will have access to the full contents of our content browser. It's kind of like a file browser or file explorer in Microsoft Windows. And so if you click on the content, you would see that you have folders called Geometry, Mannequin, Starter Content, Third Person, and Third Person CPP. So if you look at the third person, the geometry is where all the meshes are. So here, for example, cube, cube chamber, cube materials, and the template for the floor is under the geometry. The mannequin is where your character is, and it's basically split into the mesh for the character, which contains its materials, its mesh, and its textures, and also the animations that comes with the starter content packet for your mannequin. The starter contents has a bunch of different components to it. There are certain maps, several maps there. There's audio, blueprints, particle systems, materials, shapes, props, textures. Almost everything that you need for a basic game is going to be under the starter content. The third person is basically where the meshes for this template are created. And finally, the third person C++ is where the contents of your project will be. So you will have the map for your third person C++ template and the blueprints for your third person C++ template, which basically is the third person character that we have here. In the middle section, you will have the level of your game, and so you can navigate this level by W, A, S, and D to move around the level. If you hold the right click, you can pan the camera up and down, and with the left click, you can navigate, kind of like fly through your level. That way. And holding both mouse buttons, you can pan up and down or left and right your camera. So right button, mouse click, holding down is panning your camera or rotating your camera. Left button, navigating up and down, basically flying in and out. And then both buttons will be panning your view. Okay, so this is basic navigations in the level. On the right hand side, you would have the world outliner, which basically shows you everything that is already placed in the level. And at the bottom, you will see the detailed panel, which basically shows you the detail of every single component that you click on, and then the world setting, in which you would have your world tab, your game mode that you can select, the light, mass, physics, and rendering variations for your game. And at the bottom, we have the output log. I've already activated the output log. If it's not there, you can click on Windows. And we need this output log because we're going to log out a little bit later. Click on Windows, Window, and then Developer Tools. And you will notice that you have under the Log tab, you can check the output log, and that opens up the output log. So we're going to, in the next video, log a few things here, and you would be able to see it in this output log. Okay, now next is your Visual Studio. Once this project opens up, not only does the editor open up, but the Visual Studio also opens up. And so when the Visual Studio opens up, you would basically see that the solution, which is the project that we created, is called Unreal Scripting Basic. It's what I called this project. So that's the name of my solution. And then within it, I have two folders. The engine folder, which brings in within it everything that is required to be brought in from the engine for me to be able to do certain programming with this game. And then the games folder contains my Unreal Scripting Basic template that I just created. And so the source files for this project are going to be under the source folder, under the Unreal Scripting Basic folder, and at the bottom you see that there are a bunch of C++ and header files that are created. There are basically three important files that are created for me: Unreal Scripting Basic, a header file and a source file, a C++ file and a header file. Unreal Scripting Basic Character, which is the third-person character that I created. Again, a header file for it and a C++ file for it. And then Unreal Scripting Basic Game Mode, which is the game mode files that are created for me. And so basically, these are very important files that are created for me for programming. And so the basic files are effectively the portal to my project, and then the character files, and then the game mode files that I will effectively work with if I needed to make changes to my character or make changes to my game mode. Alright, so let's get our code ready for starting our first program that utilizes the logging mechanism in Unreal Engine to log some information on the editor. Basically, if you wanted to debug things as you're programming, you would want to perform these types of functionalities. So the files that we are going to be working with are going to be the character.h and the character.cpp files. So if you open up both the header file for your character and the source file for your character, then we can start programming our first C++ program with this template. In the next video, I'm going to show you how you can override the jump functionality of your character that is already created for you by the Unreal Engine. And what we will do is once the character jumps, we will log on the screen that the character has jumped. Then we'll just take this one step further, and we're going to create a variable that shows you how many times the character has jumped, and then we will effectively use this variable to inside the log. So that way I can talk a little bit about the F strings and text and how you can work with text in Unreal Engine and so forth. So this wraps up this video that shows you how to set up your basic code project in Unreal Engine, and I'll see you in the next video in which we will talk about logging on the Unreal Editor's output log.